All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Buckle up, because today we're exploring a pretty mind-bending concept, a model of the universe as like a hyperdimensional field.
Yeah, it's like taking our everyday understanding of space and like totally flipping it on its head instead of just, back and forth or up and down. We're talking about energy flowing in every single direction you can possibly imagine, all happening at the same time.
It really challenges how we normally think about dimensions, like separate layers stacked on top of each other. This model says that every single point in our good old 3D universe is like a central hub, a place where a ridiculous number of energy flows all come crashing together. It's less about separate dimensions and more about a network of interconnected, like, energy fields.
Okay, so we've got some research and articles here that suggest sound and vibrations. They might actually be the key to unlocking this whole model, even connecting it back to things like the cosmic neutrino background and the Big Bang itself. Yeah, no, it's a lot to unpack, but that's what we're here for. So let's dive in. Well, you got to start with the basics, the idea of sound, right? At its core, sound is just vibration. It's a disturbance, a wave that travels through some kind of medium. Could be air, could be water. But this model, it proposes something way more radical. It says those vibrations might actually be happening in the very fabric of space-time itself. And get this, potentially across multiple dimensions, too.
Whoa, hold on. So you're saying the universe is like a giant instrument and all these energy waves are just rippling through it, creating a cosmic symphony or something? I mean, that's a pretty wild image. But how does all this multidimensional sound connect to something like the cosmic neutrino background? Those tiny ghost-like particles left over from the Big Bang.
Ugh, neutrinos, those are fascinating little things. They're all over the universe, more abundant than you can imagine, but they rarely interact with anything. It's like they just zip right through us, like we're not even here. But this model, it says neutrinos might be the key to understanding how energy is spread across the cosmos. Think about it. These neutrinos, they might be riding the waves of those multidimensional sound vibrations. If we can map their paths, figure out the structure of this background, we might actually see evidence of these hyperdimensional energy flows.
Okay, so we're basically using these ghostly neutrinos to listen in on the universe's hidden symphony, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even trace it all the way back to the Big Bang.
Exactly. And if this model is right, then the Big Bang might not have been this random, chaotic explosion like we always thought. Instead, it could have been a much more structured event where energy was carefully distributed across the universe in very specific ways. More like a grand symphony than a Big Bang, if you will. A perfectly orchestrated spread of energy across multiple dimensions.
Okay, that's incredible. But how do we even start to prove something like this? Are there any experiments that could actually detect these multidimensional energy flows?
Scientists are working on some really promising approaches. One idea is to search for these telltale patterns in the cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang. If there are even slight irregularities in this radiation, it could hint at the influence of higher dimensions shaping the early universe.
So it's like looking for fingerprints of those multidimensional sound waves in the very first light of the universe. And pretty cool. Are there any other ways we could test this model?
Plasma physics is another area where things are getting really interesting. Scientists are using these super powerful computers to simulate the behavior of plasma, which is basically, superheated matter. And these simulations, they could reveal whether the same kinds of energy flows predicted by this model actually show up on a much smaller scale. If they do, that could be a huge step towards, backing up this whole concept.
So if these plasma simulations show those unique energy flows, it's like seeing a mini version of the universe behaving exactly the way this model predicts. That's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And there's another way to look for clues. We can analyze how galaxies are spread out across the universe. If we can find patterns in their positions and movements, patterns that can't be explained by our current understanding of cosmology, well, that could be evidence of those multidimensional energy flows sculpting the very structure of the cosmos, on a grand scale.
Okay, but hold on a second. We've been talking about these energy flows going in many directions. But this concept goes way beyond just picturing a sphere, right? Or even a 360-degree torus.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about adding a few more directions to the mix. It's about every single point in the universe acting like both a source and a receiver of energy at the same time. And that energy is flowing in an infinite number of directions all at once.
Whoa, okay. My brain is struggling to wrap itself around that one. How do you even begin to visualize something like that? It's not like we could just draw it on a whiteboard.
It's definitely a challenge to visualize. It kind of pushes our understanding of space and dimension to the limit, you know? But if we look at some of the really weird stuff happening in quantum physics, we might find some clues. Take quantum superposition, for example, where a particle can exist in multiple states at the same time, at least until we try to observe it, and then it collapses into one state.
So it's like those particles aren't actually stuck at a single point in space.
Right. And this model suggests that maybe energy in the universe works a lot like that. It's not limited to moving in a straight line from point A to point B. Instead, it's flowing in countless directions simultaneously, creating this incredibly complex web of interactions that we can barely even begin to comprehend.
Okay, so that makes the whole idea of quantum entanglement a little less spooky, right? You know, that thing where two particles seem instantly connected no matter how far apart they are.
Exactly. If everything is interconnected through this unseen multi-directional flow of energy, then maybe that spooky action at a distance isn't so spooky after all. It could just be a glimpse into the deeper, hyperdimensional nature of reality itself. It makes you question our whole concept of separation. You know, the idea that things are fundamentally isolated from each other.
So instead of a universe filled with separate objects, it's more like we're all part of this single, infinitely interwoven tapestry of energy.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It really shifts our perspective, doesn't it? Instead of seeing ourselves as these isolated beings, we start to recognize our fundamental interconnectedness with everything in the universe. And it makes you wonder, if everything is connected at this deep, fundamental level, what does that mean for us? Could it even influence things like consciousness?
Whoa, now that's a deep thought. There's definitely a lot more to explore here. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's dive into some of the more concrete experiments that scientists are using, to try and prove these mind-blowing ideas.
Welcome back. Before we got into all the cool experiments, we were talking about, the implications of everything being connected, through this constant flow of energy in all directions.
Right, and it got me thinking, if this model is right, does it mean that there are things we experience as separate or isolated that are actually connected in ways we don't even realize yet?
That's a really great question. And it leads us to some of the most exciting, but also the most challenging parts of this whole model, like consciousness, for example. What if consciousness isn't just a product of our brains, but a property of this interconnected field itself?
Okay, so instead of our brains creating consciousness, they're more like receivers, tuning into this broader field of consciousness that's all around us.
Yeah, it's a really compelling idea. It might explain some of those experiences that are hard to fit into conventional science. Things like intuition, precognition, even collective consciousness. What if those are just glimpses into the deeper connections within this hyperdimensional field?
It's definitely pushing the limits of what we think is possible. But let's bring it back to some of the more tangible aspects of this model for a second. How would it change our understanding of things like the Big Bang or even black holes?
Well, if the Big Bang was the result of these multi-directional energy flows,
Yeah.
the origin of the universe might be way different than that classic idea of a single point exploding outwards.
So instead of this tiny point expanding, it's more like a ripple in a much larger, higher dimensional reality.
Exactly. Imagine a drop of water falling into a still pond, right? That ripple spreads outwards in all directions, creating these patterns, these waves. In this case, that ripple, that's the birth of our universe, expanding not just in the 3 dimensions we can see, but across a whole bunch of dimensions that we can't even perceive.
Okay, so the universe is born from this multidimensional ripple, but what about its eventual fate? Will it all eventually collapse in on itself?
That's where things get really interesting. If energy is constantly flowing in and out of every point in this field, there might not be a true end, instead of a big crunch. It might be more of a continuous cycle, this eternal dance of creation and destruction, expansion and contraction.
So the universe is constantly evolving, but the energy that makes it up is always there, just changing from one form to another. It makes me think about black holes. Would they look different through the lens of this model?
Absolutely. Instead of thinking about black holes as these cosmic vacuum cleaners,
Wow.
sucking everything in, we might start to see them as points where these multidimensional energy flows converge, creating these singularities of immense density. They're not just collapsing matter, but maybe a collapse of space-time itself into another dimension.
Whoa, so black holes aren't just endpoints. They're more like transition points or gateways to other dimensions or even other universes, all connected within this giant web
It's a pretty mind-blowing possibility, and it could totally change how we understand the cosmos. Imagine a whole network of interconnected universes, all linked through these hyperdimensional black holes. It opens up a whole new realm of exploration and raises questions about whether those other universes play by the same rules as ours.
It really is mind-boggling. It reminds me of that Carl Sagan quote, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." But even if this model is right, are there any practical applications? Could we harness this hyperdimensional energy for things like, clean energy,
Yeah.
or even faster than light travel?
It's tempting to jump straight to those sci-fi ideas. And while a lot of this is still theoretical, the potential is definitely there. Imagine if we could learn to tap into this multidirectional flow of energy.
So we could power our civilization with the very fabric of the universe itself.
It's a bold idea, but it's not totally impossible. What if, by understanding the principles of this hyperdimensional energy, we could invent technologies that draw energy directly from the vacuum of space?
That would be a total game changer. No more fossil fuels, no more energy crises. What about transportation? Could understanding this model lead to breakthroughs in space travel? I mean, getting around the universe is pretty slow right now.
Right now, yeah, those are still dreams of the future, but they're not impossible. If we can figure out how space-time itself is affected by these hyperdimensional flows,
Yeah.
who knows, maybe we could eventually build things like warp drives, bending space to travel across vast distances almost instantly.
That would change everything about how we explore the universe. Go into another star system in days or even hours instead of years or centuries. It's insane.
It really is. And don't forget the potential in other fields, like medicine. If consciousness is connected to this hyperdimensional field, we might discover completely new ways to heal the body and mind.
So it's like tapping into the universe's own healing power. That could revolutionize everything, from treating diseases to understanding mental health.
Exactly. It suggests this incredible level of interconnectedness between our minds and bodies and the universe itself. It's something we're only just beginning to grasp.
Okay, we've talked about all these amazing possibilities, but with that kind of power
Comes a lot of responsibility,
That's
right?
it.
I mean, messing with the fabric of reality could have some pretty serious consequences.
It's like that old saying, with great power comes great responsibility. It definitely applies here.
Right. I mean, we're talking about potentially altering the very fabric of reality. There's got to be some, safeguards in place.
Absolutely. We need to approach these ideas with caution, with humility. We can't just rush into trying to manipulate these hyperdimensional energies without fully understanding the consequences.
It's like we barely understand our own brains. And now we're talking about tapping into the energy of the universe. It's a bit daunting, to say the least.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting. Think about it. We're on the verge of potentially unlocking some of the biggest mysteries of the universe. Mysteries that have baffled scientists and philosophers for centuries. Yeah, it's like every time we think we figured something out, the universe throws us a curveball. But hey, that's what keeps things interesting, right?
Exactly. That's what drives us to keep exploring, to keep asking questions, to keep pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. What does all of this mean for us in our everyday lives?
These concepts might seem super abstract, but they can have a real impact on how we see the world, If everything truly is interconnected through this multi-dimensional web of energy, it means that our actions, our thoughts, even our emotions, they all create ripples that spread out far beyond what we can see.
So we're not just these isolated individuals going about our day, but like active participants in this giant cosmic dance.
Precisely. Every choice we make, every interaction we have, it contributes to the overall harmony or disharmony of this interconnected system. It's a powerful reminder of our interconnectedness and the responsibility we have to act in ways that benefit not just ourselves, but the whole web of life.
Makes you think twice about those little everyday annoyances, doesn't it? Maybe that traffic jam isn't just bad luck, but like a tiny ripple in this grand cosmic dance.
It's a whole new perspective, isn't it? Instead of feeling like we're constantly battling against the universe, we can start to see ourselves as part of something much bigger, much more magnificent.
So instead of being overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, we can find a sense of awe and wonder in our interconnectedness.
Exactly. And that sense of awe and wonder can be a powerful motivator for positive change. If we recognize how interconnected we are, we're more likely to act with compassion, with understanding, with the desire to create a more harmonious world.
It sounds like we're talking about a kind of like cosmic responsibility.
Yes, a responsibility not just to ourselves and other humans, but to all living beings and even to the universe itself. It's about recognizing that we have a role to play in the grand scheme of things, and that our actions, no matter how small they seem, have the power to create positive change.
I love that cosmic responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty of life, there's this underlying order, this profound connection that binds us all together.
And that connection gives us hope. It gives us purpose. It reminds us that we're not alone in this vast universe. We're part of something much greater than ourselves.
Well, that's a pretty inspiring note to end on. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling the same way.
Remember, this is just the beginning of a lifelong exploration. The universe is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Keep asking questions, keep seeking knowledge, and keep your mind open to all the possibilities.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, deep divers. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of the universe. Until then, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep diving deep.